Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and in today's Focus on Tools video we're going to be talking cutting mats. So as always, these Focus on Tools videos are really aimed at people new to the hobby or returning to the hobby. And over the years that I've been building models, 46 years or so, the hobby has absolutely changed. The growing commercialisation of the hobby as the hobby shifted from being a sort of children's pocket money pastime to a more grown-up adult large model diorama industry has seen some changes, some for the better, some not so much so. And one of the changes that's happened is that we at some point got the invention of the cutting mat. So let's start with the inevitable elephant in the room. Are cutting mats an essential tool? You will see pretty much everybody uses a cutting mat these days. So what I would say is, no they're not, but as soon as you can afford to get one, get one. And we'll talk about all the different types and what to look for when you're buying one in a minute. The truth of the matter is, when I started out in the hobby, cutting mats didn't exist, and so you came up with other ways of protecting your table, and that was putting newspaper down and then having a little pad of cardboard that you cut on. So we didn't have cutting mats, so being modelers, we were a resourceful lot, and we made something that was fit for purpose so that we didn't get in trouble with mum for damaging the tabletop. Now, I can't remember when I first got a cutting mat, but I've been using cutting mats at least since some point in the late 90s, I would guess. And you have to be careful when you're buying one. And what I would say is, what you need to do is think to yourself what you want a cutting mat for. Like everything these days, cutting mats are over-commercialised, and so you end up with a bewildering array of different cutting mats, and it's hard to know what you need to buy into and what you want and what you don't want. Is a more expensive one necessarily better quality than a cheap one? So on and so forth. So let's talk through that and help you get to a point where, if you've not bought a cutting mat and you're about to, you know what you should be looking for. So they come in different sizes, and that is probably your first thought process. What size cutting mat do I want? So they range from a whole host of sizes, from really quite tiny ones to A4. These are both A4, A3, which is what you see me using in my videos, and then you can go bigger than that, A3 and larger. And you have to ask yourself, what do I want a cutting mat for? And that will then dictate what size you get. So in terms of size, if you're just going to build relatively small models, 135, 172 type stuff, and all you want it for is cutting, then you really don't need anything more than an A4 size cutting mat. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you only need something that can deal with that little area around your knife. That's all you need. So you can actually build a model and still have space to do your cutting on an A4 cutting mat. And the little building trays that you can get from Revell and Airfix or Humbrol all are based around an A4 cutting mat. I think the Tamiya work bases as well. So I would say that A4 is probably the best size for most people. If you're going to use an A4 cutting mat, you're going to likely be building in a different area than using your cutting mat for cutting. which means that you then have to have a different covering on your table or your worktop to stop paint and glue getting on it. So size depends on what size models you're building, how much cutting you're doing, and whether you want to use it for just a cutting mat or whether you want it to be more of a protective mat for your table as well. So this larger one was bought with that in mind, so that I could use it as a whole workspace, have my paint on it, have my glue on it, use it as a cutting mat wherever I wanted to be. And the idea was it would cover everything off. I use this one now, and A3 size works really well for me, and that's partly because you can just about see the edge of it here. I have a stand on my desk facing me which has my iPad on, which is recording us right now, and this stand doesn't sit flat if I've got the bigger cutting mat on. So this was bought to allow me to make videos, and was new not long before we started, so you can see how they get weathered in fairly short time. But I would suggest that most people want an A4, and that's probably where you're going to start, particularly if you're new to the hobby and don't know where you're going to go with your hobby. If you're returning and you've got an urge to do scratch building, and if you've got an urge to do scratch building and you know that you're going to be doing large scale models and you need a good big cutting area, then go and get what you need. Now the next thing to point out is not all cutting mats are self-healing. And so you want to ensure that when you buy a cutting mat, you find one that's self-healing. And what that basically means is that when you cut it with a knife, the mat comes back together and closes the cut, so that you've not got a little gutter in that you've cut into your mat. Now, this one here isn't self-healing, and you can see where I've just cut, it's actually made the mat form a little ridge, and it's no longer flat, whereas this one, which is a really good quality mat, when I've cut, you can't see where I've cut. So there is a difference. So ensure that it says self-healing. That's what you want. It doesn't interfere in what you're doing. The other thing that you want to make sure is that it's matte, so that you don't get glare. And you can see right now with my light that this mat is giving some glare, and this mat isn't giving any glare. In fact, the only glare is coming from glue that my daughter spilt on it. So, anti-glare, self-healing cutting mat is what you're looking for. I find with this one, this was a cheap purchase off, I think, eBay. I had a particular need for this, and I deliberately bought it cheap as a painting mat in a different area when I had a different modelling arrangement. And I find that my eyes get a bit tired if I'm using this for any length of time, so that's why you want anti-glare. So basically a nice matte mat. So yeah, as you can see, I use this for particular painting jobs. If I want to be painting something where I know I'm going to be painting onto the surface, off the part I'm painting and onto the surface, like I have done here with this masking tape, then I'll use this mat. It's dedicated for that purpose, and I don't care how messy it gets. But I wouldn't want to use it as a cutting mat because, like I say, your eyes get tired and it doesn't self-heal. So be careful of the cheaper mats, and if you can actually go into a shop and have a look at the mat and get a feel for it, that's better, although a lot of them inevitably are wrapped, so it can be a bit difficult to do. So those are the things to look out for when you're buying at a basic level. Now the other thing to consider is what is on a mat, and that makes a difference. pretty much only to the price, however. What you get on most mats is some form of grid, and it's usually a centimetre square, and that's quite handy. I use the grid on my mat from time to time. You'll have seen me using it in some of my builds. It's great if you want to make sure something's straight when you're cutting it. Other than that, it's not a biggie, and don't worry about it too much. The other things that are on the mats, and in the case of this Humbrol one, the A4 and the A3 are the same. So if we turn this over so you can see it more clearly, you get 132, 172, 124, 148 scale rules, so feet and meters for each one. And you think, brilliant, that's really, really good, that's really helpful. They've also got 176, which is a common scale for them. Again, meters and feet. You've got your 1 centimetre square cubes, and then you've got these angles. And, you know, it looks really, really useful. Never really used any of it, though. So don't worry too much about all the stuff that they're putting on the cutting mat. I mean, I've got angles on this, and this is double-sided, and on the other side, if I turn it over, we've got different size grid and some shapes for some random reason. And the truth of the matter is, you're using it for what you've bought it for, a mat to cut on and protect your surface. So don't be tricked into buying fancy mats with pictures of tanks on and that sort of stuff. It's just a way of getting money out of you. They may look nice, it might make your modelling desk look cool, and if you want to do that, that's great. But if you're managing a budget and you're new to the hobby, absolutely don't need that. All you need is a basic, self-healing, non-reflective cutting mat, and A4 would be my recommended size for most people beginning in the hobby. Now, I have to say, I've used lots of different cutting mats over the years, blue ones, green ones, more recently red ones. I find personally there is no real difference in the colours. Some people will say that green's easier on your eyes. Got to say, I haven't really found that to be true. The only difference that I've really come across is in the quality of the cutting surface. And the best cutting mats that I have used to date, and I've bought them from craft shops, large chain craft shops. I've bought them online, and I've bought them from Airfix Humbrol, as you can see. And the best cutting mats I've ever used have been these Humbrol ones. And they're a very, very good quality mat. They stand up really well. They do everything that you need, and they're a fair price. So that's my thoughts on cutting mats. Are they an essential tool? I think these days, yes, they are. They're such a great little tool. They really do everything that you need, as in protect your surface. They give you a little bit of control as well. So when you're cutting, they can slow down your blade. They're just really, really, really helpful. Better than using a wad of cardboard. So yes, they're an essential tool, but also you can get around not having one. That's it. That's my thoughts on cutting mats. So I hope that was helpful and useful if you're on the market for buying your first cutting mat. So take care, everyone. Enjoy your modelling, and we will see you very soon.